Welcome back, everybody. Another Cute for Teams, champions using Teams effectively. Glad to see you all. Coming here to geek out on some Teams, talk best practices, talk roadmap, all that good stuff. So happy to dive right in. Feel free to come off mute or put questions in chat. We'll be monitoring that as well. And if you came just to hear me and Stacy rant and muse about things, we can do that too.
Oh yeah, we can.
Yeah. Make sure I got my chat going.
Less rant, more musing.
Right. If you can tell by my share, I was prepared to. Last time I think I put a poll and I asked about flow and I asked about files and SharePoint. There seemed to be interest in both. So if nothing else, I thought this topic might be of interest. But before I dive into that, I will just again give you a chance. If anybody came with a specific question on anything, feel free to throw that out there now, off mute or in the chat. Glad to see everyone here, though. This is the last day before we kind of go on a hiatus, if I remember right. So if you don't ask now, you'll have to hold it in throughout the holiday, and and then you'll how will you enjoy it knowing you didn't get to ask your question. All right. Go ahead. I see you. Glenn, got a question?
Yes, one of our users asked, is there a way to, you have a team and a channel with files and a SharePoint backend. Is there a way to restrict access to the files so that only certain members in the team can access those files? If they put the files in the channel instead of the general, will only the members of that channel be able to access the files, or will every member of the team still be able to access those files?
It's almost, Glenn, it's almost as if me and you worked together prior to this meeting for you to set up all the stuff I was going to talk about. I mean, those are the key questions that that this whole concept here is really addressing. So let me see if I can take that question in some chunks. So first thing I'd say is, at a high level, the structure of Teams and files is that Teams is using SharePoint to store and manage its files. From a Teams perspective, a Teams user kind of just sees the files tab and sees them and could potentially just think these are Teams files. That's the great debate. Are these Teams files or SharePoint files? In the back end, it's SharePoint. But the good news about that, to your question, is all the power and feature of SharePoint is at your disposal because of that. I always like to remind folks, we fortunately don't have some limited crippled version of SharePoint that because it's attached to Teams, they gave us like a SharePoint Lite. This is still the SharePoint Online that your Office 365 groups was using, and which means we have lots of management capability. So long answer to your question of can I restrict and some people see this and others see that. The answer is yes, because yes, you can do that because we can use SharePoint to modify the sharing or the file access for any given file or folder in SharePoint. You can even see here this manage access right there on that that tab link, and you can see some of the default access. One of the beauty of Teams is assuming your team wants to collaborate freely and openly, so it kind of by default lets everybody see and edit everything, but it doesn't have to be the case. So this is kind of showing that all the members of this District 9 team have the edit capability. but for any down to the file level or the folder level, we can still make changes. So case in point, and I usually, when I start really dabbling with the changes, I like to go open it in SharePoint just so I have the full, capability. So we see the same files here. But if you were to tell me, for instance, that some people in the team need the test 1, 2, 3 spreadsheet access and others don't, we could come in here to manage access. And there's a couple ways we could do it. And then I'd click advanced here. Oops, now why would I not have access? Well, so we've proven that some people can not have access. I think that's because I'm not an owner of this team. Let me go back to something that I know I can control. Let's see, do we have files in here? Where are my, let's see if I mod administrator, maybe I should come in as the administrator here just to be certain. We do one quick thing here. And here, I just want to make sure I'm the owner just so I don't have to navigate a bunch of other permissions. All right, yes. All right, so let's kind of do that again. I think I was here. Test 1, 2, 3. Let's open it in SharePoint. Let's manage the access. Let's go to advanced. And so we're here in what I call old school SharePoint permissions, where we can do pretty much anything and everything, right? And so one of the things I can do here is stop inheriting permissions. That means stop all the defaults that Teams has done here so I can do my own thing. And so now I have this full control, right, where I could, for instance, grant permission to, I don't know if Deborah, right? She may not even be a part of this Teams team or the SharePoint site, but I just now have sent an invite for her to have access here to, do something with this. You can see now Deborah has unique user access here. I could then proceed to remove permissions from the members and the visitors. I probably want to keep it on the owners, right? So as you're kind of seeing here, I could add individuals, I could add folks, I could, create a new group of people in SharePoint and add people into that group. All of those things can occur here. And the typical rule there, if you don't have access to something in SharePoint, you don't see it, which would mean that once people start coming back to Teams, if I don't have access to the finalized budget plan, it will just disappear from here. So in terms of your question of, what can I see? Yes, by default, everybody in the team sees any file in any channel. But if you start making these unique adjustments, things will start disappearing or appearing based on the permissions that you've set. So that was very quick, high level of it. The short version of that explanation is yes, you can do what you were describing, and the power of doing that comes from using SharePoint permissions to make that happen. Whether it's sharing, whether it's changing permissions for people in the team, or even opening up permissions for people outside the team, even outside of the tenant, if you really needed that. So does that make sense? That was a very quick way of going through that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So hopefully that hits home for everyone. If you haven't really dived into files, is that flexibility and power that you have there. Now, the flip side of that is trying to do all of that in a way that is SharePoint friendly and Teams friendly, because you could certainly get yourself in a position where you've now done so many modifications that Teams is all of a sudden empty because you've stopped using the standard Teams channel folders, or now you're wondering who's got access to what, because you've created so many unique permissions that you've got to start diving into a file and going into the access just to see who's got what. So you want to strike a balance between trying to kind of stay within the model that Teams and SharePoint is doing with owners, members, and visitors. While yes, I could just do unique permissions for individuals across the board, that could get cumbersome for you in the long run if you were to do that on every file. Hopefully that makes sense, or that's pretty apparent how you could kind of paint yourself in a corner with enough of these modifications. So whenever possible,
that's what Tim is calling out to in the chat, that they've certainly run into some team owners that have made some modifications to those permissions in a pervasive way, and that definitely can create some issues. So hopefully people will stick to that file management from the team side. Mm-hmm. And then we had a question from Jim, and I think I'm interpreting his question right. And if so, then it's a pretty easy answer. So can you create a new role in SharePoint and apply it to a team? For example, team members by default get edit permissions, which translates into their ability to edit the actual pages for the team in SharePoint, because they would get edit on the document library, right? But their edit ability at the SharePoint page level, I think, is not by default that they can edit the pages, right?
I think Teams makes every member an editor.
Okay.
It's certainly not making them a visitor. So I think members of a team are members of SharePoint's member group, which has edit capability. And and teams I've been in, I've never had a problem editing a SharePoint page as a member of that team. So to me, that's the team's rule of thumb: is everybody's in here is trusted and can edit and can delete and do what they need to do. And for most of us, that works. Sometimes I know that could be troublesome. But I think to the other heart of your question, yes, you can come in and start into, I didn't want to do that, into SharePoint site permissions and start making new groups, and do all of these kind of things, right? So you can see things here, and then advanced permissions. I can really, I can create groups. I can start doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. But so that applies at every level, not just the document library level.
Right. Again, though, the further you move away from what Teams has done out of the box, you just now, or you're on a path of just
complexity.
Managing what you've done, and managing that complexity. The answer is certainly yes, but it's like that great power, great responsibility kind of a thing. So the other part of your question or comment, yes, we run into trouble where people are modifying and now we don't know what's going on. So if you do know that you do need to control that, right? Sometimes we create teams, we know, hey, I made this team for full collaboration. Everybody do what they need to do. If I'm making a team where, one, I know I have files that need some more control and management, or I know I've got team members that maybe aren't ready for the responsibility that they have. If it was me, I would make that team and then start to put some controls in place right away. If there are key files that I want to make sure don't willy-nilly get changed, I would probably change some permissions on them, maybe turning check-in, check-out on for those files. I'd basically start leveraging the advanced file management, document management capabilities of SharePoint to quote unquote protect those files a little more than out of the box Teams, what Teams would do out of the box. So you don't have to live with a Wild West of, yes, I've got this team and everybody can do what they want and I just got to live with it. You don't have to. But, if you've got the foresight to know what you're trying to protect or govern more closely, then you can apply the appropriate permissions on those. So, you know, I always start with check in, check out for any files where I'm worried about people making a lot of changes willy-nilly, because that's where someone explicitly has to basically put it in edit mode and then remove it from edit mode every time they work with it. And then certainly I would take put key documents maybe in a certain library and put a key set of permissions on that as well. So, and if you do go down that road, know that Teams can still be flexible with that as well. So the Files tab is certainly the place for that specific channel. It's pointing to a folder named after the channel, but maybe you've got libraries and folders outside of this structure. That works. They won't be automatically visible in Teams with this model, but that's when you could go into, say, for instance, the document library tab here, and add a tab to some other library or folder that isn't in that model, whether it's in the team or even outside the team. So there's still ways to show it, and in fact, it shows through very elegantly as well. So it's not like it's just a website tab to some SharePoint library. The document library tab here brings it in pretty elegantly. So so you can have the best of both worlds with a little bit of effort. So it's kind of looking at the chat there. People accidentally edit a SharePoint page, which places it in a state. And I think what I'm hearing from that, I agree, for those that are wondering maybe what we're talking about, you know, a SharePoint page here, like for instance, the home page can be edited, but I agree with you. I've seen folks who leave it in a, you know, they leave it like checked out or in an edit state. Next thing you know, you're trying to figure out who, you know, somebody needs to release this so we can, you know, fix it. So yeah, there needs to be some training there perhaps as well.
Yeah, and if you have a consistent issue with SharePoint pages being edited in a particular team that is causing problems, then you can take Lisa's suggestion from the chat, which is to go to that team's SharePoint pages folder permissions and change those there while leaving the rest of the SharePoint document library and everything in a default inherit state for the permissions. You can change them just at that folder level and restrict any site page editing.
Oops, I forgot where, I don't know where I went. Oh, yeah, sorry. So yeah, that's what we're talking about there, the site pages and making some setting changes there.
Yeah, just to restrict that from being a consistent headache with a certain group.
You can also have the option under the File tab to include cloud storage, which can be used to link in other. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, that and that's just kind of a subtle aspect to Teams. You know, where we're used to the Files tab, and for your typical Teams user that isn't really thinking about the back end, it seems like this is all I've got in terms of doing files and Teams, but we can certainly apply some flexibility there as well. Yeah, there are SharePoint pages could be shown with the SharePoint tab, or document libraries with that one. Website tab could be used as well, but again, these are going to elegantly, in my opinion, elegantly integrate those things in versus just almost like just an iframe. It's not as bad as an iframe, but yeah, I would try to use these before I try to use the website tab.
Ricardo,
Yep.
There's one thing. It right there under Files. If you click on the three dots, no, not tabbing in. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
go back. You can click on the three dots. You can include cloud storage right there, and
Right.
that actually puts it inside of the file structure in under the Files tab.
Oh, gotcha.
And
Yep.
so, but the permissioning is, like you said, it's driven by that SharePoint site. So that way
Right.
you can bring in an external set of documents, but it's right there so everybody can find it. Because sometimes people don't see it in that other tab.
Right. Yep.
So there's a slight difference there. It's not a lot, but
yeah. So yeah. So that's just like he's pointing out, then you got that there with, and you could maybe see the little link there. And we had the same concept in OneDrive, and I personally use that sparingly, just because to me this feels like it could, if the the end user isn't paying attention, it could get a little confusing. Thinking that they're, potentially, working on files that are a part of this particular team or something like that. So I like the transparent, seamless nature of this for the end user. And in most cases, if I'm just trying to access the files, that's going to work. Sometimes I just worry about the end user making some assumptions about what they're looking at with that cloud storage link. But it's definitely very convenient there. Yep. So again, one call out here, again, just remembering that I think it's often forgotten that all of those capabilities does mean that I can house files in my team, and it still does not preclude me from exposing that to people outside the team. So they don't have to become a member of my team just to see one file, or one folder.
Good
So
point.
I've certainly run into that a lot where, hey, we've been doing all this work in here, but I would love for the rest of the company to see this stuff. Well, I'm not going to add the company to the team, and I don't have to. I can, take that one folder or document or whatever it may be, and then, make the appropriate adjustments there. So super great question, Glenn. I hopefully it answers your question for what you're trying to do, but it also was a great set off for the conversation of files and in Teams. And as we're pointing out here, and I think hopefully all know this by now, but these teams are using SharePoint for managing their files. But as we come into chat and start chatting with people, our individual chats and document sharing here is happening via our OneDrive accounts. So Teams is using both. One could argue OneDrive is a fancy SharePoint site, but without going into that, we're OneDrive over in our chat area. We are SharePoint in our Teams area. OneDrive is my files, SharePoint is our files. And then, of course, the files area is trying to bring the best of all of that together. So it's showing us the Teams files as well as our personal OneDrive cloud storage as well, and then any other storage we want to integrate in there as well. And then taking that just one more step further, as that document was trying to show, we then have our private channels and shared channels, and they are using a similar model, except that when I make this private channel, it's behind the scenes is making an additional SharePoint site specific to that channel. So in the case of this project team, morale and whatever this is, morale employee something or other, this team has a SharePoint site backing it, but then this no peeking channel has an additional site backing it for its files. So that is, of course, another important distinction. That's usually that's going to work. That's why it works, the way you want it to, right? All of this channel, no one has access to unless you give them access. And the way Teams chose to implement that is by creating an additional site with its own set of permissions. So it's not inheriting from the main team and its SharePoint site. Hopefully that makes sense. So that would be the third nuance of files and teams. So SharePoint for the teams, OneDrive for the chats, and then separate SharePoint for the private and shared channels. I can see that being a little confusing, but hopefully that made sense. Going through the chat here. So I don't know, Stacy, are you addressing this conversation button in Word?
Yeah, I just did a quick check, and I'm gonna double check it actually, because it ended up opening the document in Word. But I'm responding to Amanda. I actually think that Amanda, could it be a policy change from your IT admin that's limiting that?
The webinar feature or the conversation?
Yes.
The webinar feature, we've noticed it different. So like one of our teammates, it went away for, and then it went away for me, and then it went away for somebody else after they signed in and signed out. I don't think it's a policy change, but I know that
I don't see it in Ricardo's either.
Right.
It's still in mine, which is why I asked that question.
On the roadmap, it says that webinar is going to be updating. It's rolling out right now, so that's what we were guessing. We just wanted to confirm it.
How long has it been?
I believe just this week, because somebody went to, and we were still able to do it from the web browser. So that's why I was thinking that maybe it was because they were updating the desktop version.
Okay. Yeah, I can do it from both in my demo tenant, but interesting. Okay. Yeah, if there is something rolling out, I would say then, give it till Monday. But if it's still not there, then I think it's ticket opening time, unless IT has changed a policy internally.
Yeah, definitely something's up.
It makes me feel better, and sorry, Ricardo, but it does make me feel better that he sees that same thing in his demo tenant.
Yeah, we have people missing it too
related
on our end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. So they're in full push motion. I'm guessing.
The desktop did ask me to refresh it. We'll see if that changes anything. Nope. So.
Okay.
Yeah, live troubleshooting there. We definitely see an issue there. So.
Yeah, and the other one, the chat or the conversation within a Word document when it opens in Teams being missing is new. I'm going to go look and just double check. I'm trying currently to find a library with a Word document uploaded. I guess I should just upload one.
I've actually noticed that in Excel and PowerPoint also, where you no longer have that button. You can add comments to the document, but you can't have a conversation around it anymore. And I always used that in order to like bring attention and tag people to like, hey, I need this reviewed, and then it would post in the conversation in the Teams channel. But I think that.
So what we were told was this. Stacy, if you go back to where you had that Word document open,
I think it's Ricardo driving. So.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
But you can pin Word to the left rail now. And so if you pin it over on the left rail, you can right click and pop it out. And this was actually in a message center notification. And so now you could open the Word document. So what you essentially have is two windows open. And that's the implication in the message center notification. It was saying they were lining up the the buttons across the top for Word Online and new M365 or whatever they're calling it. So the idea would be you'd be working on the Word document that you have, and then you'd be jumping back over to Teams and chatting. It seems a little awkward to me, but that seemed to be their justification, just so you know.
Well, what I was going with is there's conversations about a tab of a document. So that's why I just made that document one a tab. Oops, sorry. And then I have my conversation there. So one could argue, it is the conversation. It looks like the conversation for the document. It's the conversation for the tab for that document, but same concept applies. And then I go back out here, I can see there's the document, there's my conversation. That's how I'm used to having conversations about documents. It sounds like we're saying that was.
There used to be a little quick button. So go back to your Word document where it was, where you saw it across. No, not that one. Sorry, the Teams version of it.
Okay, yeah. So this here.
Yeah, so open there. Yeah, and when it opened in Teams, right across the top, the right-hand side, there would be a button that said conversation or something like that.
Okay.
And then it would open the conversation right on the right-hand side, just like you were showing in the tab. It was real nice. I agree that it's much easier to do the old way. But
yeah, I used it all the time. I would hate to have to make it a tab just for me to get the conversation piece. Like that seems a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. And I just
because I actually don't prefer the tabs. I don't like the tabs because it gets very messy across the top if you don't clean those up once in a while. And you've got people that, they like the tabs and they set a million tabs. Well, I don't use them, so I don't care for them myself.
Right. And I did just quickly check my commercial tenant, same behavior. So it's not a GCC thing. Okay, well, that's glad we pointed that one out. So we'll have to try to track that one. See if something new is coming there. Interesting. And then and if I open desktop app, I wouldn't expect it there either. So okay. Interesting. All right. Well, that was lively conversation from my perspective. So glad we could have that chat. Went over a little bit, but you guys still hanging in with us. That's good. Any other last minute burning questions, comments, or thoughts? Okay. Timothy pasted a message center post. I thought you had typed all that up.
Thank you so much, Timothy. That's helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, good deal. So like I said, we are going on a break for a couple of weeks. You don't have to remember it. If you try to come here next Friday, the webpage will just say happy holidays or something. So that will remind you if you do happen to forget. Beyond that, I guess we'll wrap up for the day. See you guys in a couple weeks, and we'll keep going with that'll be episode 85, I think, coming up here soon. So
wow.
Yeah, I know. So good to see everybody. Have a great weekend, great holiday.
Happy holidays
to you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and check out the blog for more content.